Today on Brew Talk, Fermentation Fundamentals.
Okay, got a lot of questions here. Just get to it. We get a lot of questions about basics. These are just examples. If I don't read your question, please don't be upset. We had 4 or 5 of the same exact question. The first one that showed up is the one that I chose. Anyway, photo jaunt, JNT. Sorry, not sure. It's not really a word, so I can't really pronounce it very well. Anyway, day 1 equals 1.078. Then a month later, 1.012. What do you think I may have done wrong? Okay. I responded to this with, why do you think you did something wrong? But what I really wanted to say was, you didn't actually give me any information. I don't know what this is. Is it a wine? Is it a beer? Is it a mead? Is it from a recipe? Is it juice? Is it fruit? We know nothing about this. Very, very difficult to help, okay? That's kind of what this video is about too. Help us to help you. His response, wouldn't the first rack need to be 1.1xx? The chart says the ABV is only 2.0. Wait, I think I misunderstood the way to take this reading. So the first tells you potential alcohol. You want your first rack at 1.000 line-ish to signify that it's done. Then refer back to your first reading, correct?
Now,
yes and no and maybe are the answers to those questions.
And part of the reason why this gets easily complicated is because hydrometers themselves are slightly complicated. They have 3 different charts if you rotate the device around.
Brix, potential alcohol, and specific gravity. We talked about specific gravity a couple weeks ago.
Right. And for all intents and purposes, whenever we're referring to the hydrometer,
pretend there's one graph.
We're referring to the specific gravity chart. We pretty much ignore the other 2.
Brix is just another way of referring to specific gravity. It's got a whole calculation and everything to be able to convert. I don't bother with it. Some winemakers still use it, but specific gravity just carries over to everything and it works really well. The potential alcohol, I think, is bad. It's very misleading and gives people wrong ideas. Don't ever use it. And I know somebody's going to go, oh, but if it said it's at 16% and then it finishes at 4%, all I have to do is subtract the 4 from the 16 and I get 12. And you know what? They'd be right. However, what about when you change things up, when you add more, when you mix it differently, when you do, there's a million ways that can go wrong.
And we've had a lot of new brewers who don't understand the process read the potential gravity and go, oh, that's what my brew is going to be.
Yeah, and it doesn't really work like that.
No.
It's called potential for a reason. Potential doesn't mean real. It means, well, it could get to this, but you know what? I could make a must that says it has a 50% potential ABV. It'll never get there, but it said 50% on the graph. Anyway, so to answer this guy's question, he's a little bit confused. I actually told him to go watch some of our other videos because some of this stuff isn't making sense. I think he's reading from instructions and trying to convert the instructions into some of our ways of doing things and getting a little confused on the way. This is one of the reasons why we say, if you've never brewed before, do not just go out on a whim and throw stuff in a jug and hope it'll work. Follow along to a prescribed recipe. One of ours is great. There's many out there that work just fine. Pick one that speaks to you. I mean, ours are pretty simple. We like to keep it that way on purpose because we really are aiming towards people who've never brewed before. Although, you know what? I've been brewing for a long time. Paul's been brewing for a long time. Adam's been brewing for a long time. These are our mods. Mike's been brewing for a long time. And we still do it the same way. So you never really outgrow this system, but it's a great way to start too. Okay? Controversial Hunter.
I like that name.
Yeah, I wonder what he hunts that makes him controversial. Or is he just controversial and a hunter? See, there's a couple ways to see that. Okay, so let's say
he hunts for controversy.
I do that.
Yes, you do.
That doesn't make me a hunter. I'm a controversy finder. I tend to just find it. Anyway. Okay, so let's say a person makes a mead without a hydrometer. Then said person buys a hydrometer. But it isn't for a few days. Will the hydrometer still let a person know when their mead is done? Now, just to be clear, I'm asking for a friend. I told him this in the comments too. Your friend can rest. Your friend is fine. They can rest in the assurance that they can totally figure things out. However, without an initial reading, it's hard to know what your alcohol content is. You can sort of estimate your OG if you know what you put in there, but it's an estimate at best, because if you're not exactly right with your measurements or with the amount of liquid, it'll be off by as much as 5, 10, sometimes even 20 points. So it's best to know. But yes, you can totally use it to find out if it's done, just like we always say. When you think it might be getting close, take a reading. Wait a week. Don't do anything to it. Wait a week. Take another reading. If those two readings don't change, it's done. That means it's stable. And stable simply means it's not going to ferment anymore unless you do something to it to change that. If you dilute it, if you add more sugar to it, you're changing it so it won't be stable anymore. Okay? Cyber Crash 3000 on making wine from grape juice. What if you used red wine yeast? Would that not work to make medium dry, not sweet? Okay. On the surface, that sounds like a very simple question that the answer would be, yeah. However, it's not actually that simple. You want to do it?
And to complicate this further, we have to backtrack and understand yeast a little better. I'm going to use an analogy of comparing yeast to dogs.
I'm really curious to see where to go with this.
There's lots of breeds of dogs, right? But they're all dogs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good.
So if you look at their genus and all their scientific names, it's the same thing. They're just different.
They're all bred to do different things.
Breeds. So one's got extra fluffy fur, one's got big floppy ears, one is really big, one is really little tiny, but they're all dogs. Yeast, despite what people may think or what marketing may try to tell you, is yeast.
Saccharomyces cerevisiae.
So what does that mean? That means that the yeast, which are living organisms, have been bred to have that fluffy tail, or in the case of yeast, be able to create more alcohol, or live in a higher concentrated sugar environment.
Different temperatures, different acidic levels.
Have fruity esters, be more whatever.
Yep.
That's all the variants of the yeast. But basically,
that was good. I was concerned at first. But that was really good. That's very appropriate.
So that's part of the problem of this question. The other part of the question is we don't have enough information here, and that's a common theme that you'll see. Is when we get questions, people will just ask us a question without giving us all the information needed for us to answer the question. So that is the basis of yeast is yeast. So that's only part of the equation here. I'm guessing what they're trying to get is they want to make a medium dry wine.
Not a sweet wine.
Not a sweet wine, and they wanted to know if they could use a red wine yeast.
There's two ways to go about that from the recipe that they're going from. This is our sweet red wine. They could either use less sugar, and that would make it drier, or use a higher alcohol tolerance yeast. We use bread yeast for that, which is like 11.8 to 12%. So if they used a 13 or 14% with the same recipe, yes. So it's actually a simple thing, but it's not so simple as to just be, use a different yeast. With that exact recipe, using a higher tolerance yeast will do it. But not all red wine yeast is going to be 14 or 15%. There are some that are like 11s and 12s. So it's not quite that simple. Okay. The Fin on sparkling sweet spice cider. No sugar? How come? Because we don't want it to be high ABV. That's simple.
Also, there was already sugar in the juice.
There are natural sugars in the cider. There are natural sugars in the juice already. If we had added sugar to it, it would have just raised that ABV. In this case, we're trying for something more of a session cider, 4 to 8%, somewhere in that range. So that's why we didn't do that. Plus, in my opinion, in this exact instance, adding sugar is not going to add flavor. It's merely only going to add alcohol. That's it. So there's really not a lot of reason for it unless you just want something higher alcohol. Okay, Weston 999 on the sparkling sweet cider video again. Did he actually use an unopened pack of yeast? What is the world coming to? Winky smiley face.
This is an inside joke because lots of times when we're filming a video, we have a partially opened package that we're using. And that's because certainly we share a lot of our brews with you, but there's quite a few we do off camera just for our own enjoyment and our own experimentation.
Not lately. We've been doing a lot on camera. So yeah, that's why. That was just a joke. Mike Gaming. It's quarantine, so I couldn't get my hands on grape juice. So I bought fresh yellow grapes, put it in a juicer, and then put sugar and bread yeast in the juice. Is it going to work? And what do you think? Okay, this is one of those situations where I really wish you had asked me before you did it, because I might have been able to help you. But as this question stands, I believe I told him it will make alcohol, most likely, depending on how much juice, how much sugar, what yeast. There's so many factors here that we weren't given the information on, I can't really help. But that is the way you make wine. I mean, that is the basic way to make wine. Without knowing, get up. Anyway, classic role player. So you racked after just a week? Mine's at a week tomorrow. Guess I'll do the same.
And this goes back to our racking video, where we talked more about that process. And with brewing, this is...
My environment is different than yours.
Right. And we like to pretend like we're in control of the brewing process. We're not. We're not at all. Basically, Brian likes to joke and say, brewing is easy as long as you just get out of the way. Mm-hmm. And
Mead wants to make itself.
That's kind of true.
GTFO.
You want to just let it do its thing.
So true.
And because that's the nature of the beast, there is no specific time that at this day do this thing and at this day do this thing.
There's generalizations. Like you can say for a low ABV cider, for instance, 7 to 10 days is a generalization, but it could be 6. It could be 20. There's no real way to know. Meads, oh my God, they could be anything. Yeah. I mean, you can have a mead done in a week. You can have a mead take 6 months. So the generalization, here's the thing about generalizations. Generalizations are generally wrong. It's just that simple. And that's true in everything, not just brewing.
So should he rack at a week time because we did? Not necessarily. Maybe it's ready to rack. Maybe it needs a couple more weeks. Maybe it needs a month. Who knows?
I believe this was actually on the original Viking Blood video, and it was removing the cherries. I felt at that time that needed to be removed because we had a lot of space in that bucket. But if you do it differently, under different conditions, you can wait a lot longer. Yep. Okay, just in that exact instance, I wanted them out, and I believe I actually did it after 2 weeks. But anyway, Nick Witt. I have watched most of the videos on mead y'all have done, and I have finally started to make my own mead. And I got everything set up on the first night. It started to bubble a lot, but the morning of the second day, it has not bubbled at all. Is this normal? I'm broke and had to use some Fleischmann's bread yeast. Is this normal? Well, there's nothing wrong with using Fleischmann's bread yeast. We've done it in several videos, and I may start doing more of it because everybody's on lockdown and can't get stuff, so it's okay. As far as the bubbling first night and not the next day, it's a little unusual, I'll give you that. But it's not necessarily a problem. It's a little unusual, but it's not the end of the world. What I told him to do was let it go. Give it, just let it go. Give it a reading in a couple of weeks and find out if it's doing anything. It's entirely possible that you're in a bucket and the seal isn't working. It's entirely possible that maybe you had a cold brew going in and your room was warmer, so as it warmed up to temperature, it started bubbling right away, and now it just needs a couple days for the lag phase to kick in. There's a lot of reasons why it could do that. Don't get crazy. If it's only been like 24 or 48 hours, don't even worry about it. Once you get past 3 or 4 days, if it's not brewing then, throw some yeast in, you'll be fine. El Chirquois. I think that's how to say that, I'm not sure. Hi, I really love your videos. I made a ginger beer with raisin and sugar and yeast. After the fermentation, I figured there's no bubbles in it. It smells like a beer. In your opinion, how much ABV? Again, just telling us that there's ginger beer with raisins and sugar and yeast.
And this is probably a good time to help us help you.
Yeah.
If you have a question on a brew, particularly if it's an ABV question or
something with numbers,
or what should I do next question, there's some things that we need to know in order to help you. We need to know your recipe. Well, yes, that was one of the ones that I was going to say. We need to know your batch size because there's a huge difference between an amount of ingredients in a 1 gallon brew versus the amount of ingredients in a 5 gallon brew.
Oh, sorry. Let me interrupt for a second. We get this question a lot, and I mean a lot, and I don't understand why. People say, you made a 1 gallon. What if I wanted to make 3 gallons? What if I wanted to make 5 gallons? Multiply it by the number of gallons. That's it. Almost everything except the yeast. Use my rule. Up to 3 gallons, use half. Over 3, use a whole. Yep. Other than that, just multiply all the volumes.
The ratios should remain the same, and they scale up with the volume.
It's a very rare recipe that it doesn't.
Right.
Like, most times, you just scale it up because you're making more.
So we need to know how many gallons or
batch size.
Batch size. We need to know your ingredients list and their amounts.
Yeah, their quantity.
We need to know exactly what type of yeast you're using.
Mm-hmm.
And
those are the big ones.
The last one would be time frame.
Yeah.
Like, did you just make this today? Did you make it
if you have readings, that's helpful too.
And readings, yes. Yeah. Gravity readings are certainly helpful. Brian is really good at trying to figure out approximate.
Yeah, but it's still an approximate.
Right. But if you actually do take the gravity readings, those help as well.
Helps a lot. Yeah.
With that complete list of what your brew is doing, we could probably answer
almost anything you could ask.
Almost anything you could throw at us.
Yeah, with that. And if I don't know, I'll find out.
Yes.
But without the information, I can't answer. And I've had people actually get mad at me and say, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, you just asked me what's the ABV of this thing that I threw a bunch of sugar in. How much sugar did you put in? I don't know. How am I supposed to tell you then? It doesn't work like that. And it just gets a little bit disappointing because we want to help. But if we don't have the information, we can't really help. And I know that this is a confusing thing and it's new to a lot of people. They've never heard of any of this stuff, so I get that. And that's why we're doing this video. To let you know, if you tell us, we can help.
Yep.
Pink Warrior, this is on the reused lease video. Thanks, gonna have to try this out, but could you still step feed like this, or would you need to put all your sugars in first to stop the brew from becoming vinegar?
Finish.
Also, did the ABV come out lower than you expected because there is some alcohol in there which could drop it a bit more than expected? Now, I'm going to answer the second part of that first and then the first part. They have a point because we put most of the fermentables on top of an already fermented product that had some alcohol in it, which would make the gravity seem lower. They have a point. However, it was about that much in the bottom of that 3-gallon container. A few points at best, not the 16-point difference that we had, right? Also, because we did have a 16-point difference, there's an upcoming video to this. Also, on their first part, this I'm not sure I understand correctly, but I'm going to answer it the way I think what they're asking. They're under the assumption that if you step feed, you could promote vinegar. But if you put in all the sugars first, you won't make vinegar. Vinegar has absolutely nothing to do with the sugar content. Okay?
In order to make vinegar, you need alcohol and oxygen.
Right. So in fact, step feeding is probably more likely to create vinegar than the other way around, but not for the reason that they proposed. However, if you do it right, you're still kind of producing gases while you're adding more of your fermentation in, so it's not really going to be a problem. But that's a whole other video. We actually did that. David Kramer, what's up? Yo. I'm having an issue. I came across some black honey. Now, I'm not sure what he means by black honey. There's a lot of things that could be considered black honey. But it's not actually important for the question. We'll continue on. I came across some black honey a while back and decided to make some mead. After mixing everything and using a 14% ABV yeast, it went dry at 9.5% since I didn't add the normal amount of honey. I'd like to stop right there. There's no such thing as a normal amount of honey. Okay, you can use all kinds of variances for this. Depends on what you want. After seeing the sediment clear out and noticing it looked very close to bourbon in color and clarity, I had a wild idea to instead make this a sack mead project and then added charred oak in secondary. Okay. So I added a ½ pound more black honey and then threw in some K1 V1116 yeast to hopefully step feed to 20% or so. But now I have a very sluggish fermentation, barely bubbling at all. Any advice how to fix this, or should I just sit back and wait? I told him to sit back and wait. Couple of things here. I probably would not have put the wood chips in yet. I think some of the acids in the wood chip could actually be what your problem is for your sluggish fermentation. Also, I wouldn't have put more yeast in yet. You had an active colony of 14% yeast, and you put in an 18% yeast. If you're, I don't know that I would have done that. I believe they might be competing, which is a possibility. It could happen. So maybe the K1V will get killed off, and then the 14% is going to take over anyway, because it was already well established. But it's a tricky situation. You could step feed it past 14%, but there's no reason to go to 20. You already have this started this way. I might, at this point, to save this, first let it go for a while. See what happens. It might work out just fine. Sometimes it can just take a little while for things to change over, and it works out. If not, I would probably get those wood chips out of there ASAP. I might even do that anyway. Get them out of there. You can always save them, dry them out, save them, put them in secondary or conditioning phase later once this is done fermenting. I really don't like to oak age things while they're fermenting. Yeah. Even winemakers don't like to do that because here's what happens. It starts to pull things out of the wood that aren't necessarily good for your wine, and then when you rack, some of those flavors, gone. So you lose much of what you were doing, and it can actually sort of hamper your yeast a little bit, depending on the wood you used. Okay. And then there's some things that I've seen, scary things that I've seen. So I'm going to talk about them. These are no particular questions from any particular person, but they're things that are important to talk about. Here's a question I saw in a Facebook group. I made a mead, and it's bubbling away for about 5 days now. When should I add more yeast?
We actually get this question personally ourselves a lot. When should I add more yeast? When should I add more yeast? And it's very confusing to us.
Where are they getting the idea that you need more yeast from? I don't understand, because in my brews, the only time we ever add more yeast is if we have a stall or a failure of some kind. And even then, rarely, because that's not usually the answer. There's more questions, and then they all kind of group together. Random question. If I want more alcohol, can I just add more yeast? Again, similar concept. People seem to think that adding yeast means you get more alcohol. It's not actually true. And it depends on the yeast, it depends on the situation, like we've been trying to get to. I mean, you have the two things. You have the yeast tolerance, and you have the amount of sugars that you put in there. And one has to support the other. If you have more sugars than the yeast tolerance can handle, you're going to have a sweet brew. If you have less sugars than the yeast tolerance can handle, you're going to have a dry brew.
If your yeast only supports so high of an ABV, you might get it to go a little bit higher, but
yeah, if
you keep throwing in more yeast or more sugar, it's going to stop where it's going to stop. Yeah. That's not the answer.
And then another random question. How much sugar to make a sweet wine? Again, not really enough information to go on. What we're getting at here, though, is a lot of people seem to have a misunderstanding. Oh, wait. A lot of people seem to have a misunderstanding about the yeast-alcohol conversion ratio here. I have actually had arguments with people because they used Lalvin EC 1118 that they should have an 18% brew, even though they did not put in anywhere near enough sugar to get to 18%. I mean, one guy, literally 3 tablespoons of sugar in a gallon, thought that it should be 18% wine. In a day, no less. He thought it should only take about 24 hours. I don't know where some of these ideas come from, and this terrifies me. Comment that happened today on our channel. Somebody said, this video is far too long. You could have done this in less than 5 minutes. I think it was on our ginger beer video. And I deleted the comment in the end. But my initial, what I wanted to write out, I did write it out, and then I backspaced it out, is here's the thing. There's a lot of channels out there that'll just say, do this and do this and do this, and they don't actually explain anything, and you don't get to learn. It's teach a man a fish versus give a man a fish. They're saying, do this and this and this, and you get this. But they don't actually give you the whole story, and they don't explain it, and they don't teach you anything. And we get more people that come from channels like that and view videos like that coming to our channel asking us questions, and we end up having to slow them down, bring them back to step one, and start all over again. So to me, I mean, yeah, are our videos long? Sure, this one's probably, geez, I'm looking at the thing. It's probably going to be 20 minutes, 25 minutes. But look at all the information that we're giving you. We could just say, put sugar in a juice, add yeast, shake it up, wait 2 weeks, and it's done. We could say that. And the video would be 30 seconds long, and you would hate me. Because when it doesn't work, or it doesn't work exactly the way I said, I did it wrong, right? But in fact, I did a disservice by saying that, because that's not the whole story. There's so much more to it than that, and that's what we want you guys to understand. So ask away. We're happy to help with questions. But if I say, I can't answer this question, it's because I can't answer the question with what you gave me.
There was tons more stuff we were planning on covering in this video.
But it
like
got long.
Tannins and acids and sugars versus fermentable versus unfermentable sugars.
I think that could be a whole other video.
But that's going to be another video. So,
as always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.